Welcome to the living room where we listen, learn, and live together. I'm your host, Richard Martin, and I'm grateful for your presence. The heroes of the past several months have not always been visible. Their names don't always appear on the front of newspapers or magazines. You don't often hear their stories on news stations. But if you have relatives who are what we call frontline workers, you know that without them, these past several months would have been very different. I'm grateful that we have one such frontline worker, a hidden hero with us in the living room. She's a friend of mine, and I'm delighted to hear her story as a nurse, pre COVID and during COVID. Please welcome with me to the living room, Monique Johnson. What's going on, Mo?
Hey Richard, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you. I want you to
Same.
know that I'm proud of you and the work that you are doing.
Thank you. I'm proud of you too and the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. It's crazy. Seems like just yesterday I was arriving at Oakwood in 2007, you in 2008, and we're not old. We're not old. We are older, and it's. I'm glad we're both operating in our not just profession but out of our sense of vocation and calling and purpose. So let's start there. How did you decide to pursue a path of nursing?
So I wish I had like a really great story for you guys. I know I've always wanted to be a nurse, but it's not true. I
Mhm.
actually always wanted to go to Oakwood. So I never heard about Oakwood. Like I was born and raised Adventist, but I never heard about Oakwood. So it was kind of interesting. I found out about Oakwood when I was about 15 years old when I met like a second or third uncle who happened to have went there, and he was like, "You should go." Me being from Miami, Florida, I was like, "I am not going to Alabama. You've got to be kidding me! Like I'm from Miami." Da da da. And when my brother, I have a brother who's older than me, we went on like a little college tour with him and we stopped in Alabama. My mom just like snuck us up there. And I absolutely just fell in love with Oakwood. Like I just was in heaven. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know a place like this existed. And so I just wanted to go to Oakwood. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I would always switch, like, oh, maybe I'll be a pharmacy, or I wanted to be like a dolphin trainer and work at SeaWorld. And I just wanted to do like so many different things. Inevitably, I was doing TV production all throughout high school. So I wanted to do a lot of like production stuff. And I actually got an internship at NBC News Station when I was 17, and they decided to keep it for me until I turned 18. And I was thrilled. But the problem was, if I went and did that, then I wouldn't be able to go to Oakwood. It was like one or the other.
Mm.
And so I ended up just saying, like, I don't know, I really want to go to Oakwood. So I gave up the internship and just like arrived at Oakwood, no major. And I think I was talking to like registration and I was like, what major do you guys have here? That's a really good major. And they were like, well, our nursing program's good. And I was like, okay, whatever, sign me up.
That's actually a great story. I'll take it. I'll
I
do
just,
nursing.
yeah, I just wanted to be at Oakwood. It didn't matter what I was doing, but I also wanted to do something there that they had. I knew that I mean, they had TV production, but I knew that that wasn't like their thing. So I wanted to go to school for the thing that was their thing. And aside from theology, apparently nursing was also like one of their higher majors. And I was like, okay, like I'll do it, fine. And so I did.
So as I recall it, during our time at Oakwood, nursing majors did not have an easy road. You had to earn your grades. You had to earn literally access into or acceptance into the program. For a person who's listening who's interested in pursuing a path of nursing, whether or not they've just graduated from high school or maybe they're looking to pivot in their career, what advice might you give them? What things should they think about when it comes to pursuing nursing?
Yeah, I would say a few things is like, I wouldn't really be super concerned about what school you go to. A lot of people are really pressed about, I want to do nursing. And then they go and they sign up for this school and there's a 2-year wait list.
Okay.
Like, why are we waiting to get into that school? You know what I mean? Like there are so many other schools that don't really have that much of a wait list, or like
Hmm.
a school like Oakwood, there was not really a wait list. They just kind of like kicked you out if you weren't doing good.
Sure.
So there's a lot of schools that you don't really have to necessarily wait to get into. And I think a lot of nurses that I have met, they spend a lot of time, 2, 3 years waiting to get in. And so they're becoming nurses older. And a lot of them have that regret. I should have just looked at a different school. Like I wanted to go to that school because I thought it was going to be like so good, but I
Right.
mean, go learn your nursing somewhere that they're gonna let you in there, that you don't have to wait and put your life on hold for that long. And then, especially now in 2020, there's so many different ways you can do your clinical. Like, it doesn't have to just be so cookie cutter. Like, you can still be a good nurse and go to your community college nursing school. Like, you don't have to
True.
go to these Ivy League nursing schools, because inevitably nursing school is great, but you don't learn
Hmm.
how to be a nurse until you become a nurse.
Okay.
So
That's a great way to put it, and I think a lot of professions could relate to that. I know I can. Pastoring in the textbook sense is in some respects similar to what it is in practice, but I would say the majority of it is quite different. And that's no shade or knock on the formative years. I think education is definitely necessary and foundational, but you learn to pastor by doing it. So I can resonate with that and imagine that as a nurse, there's one thing to simulate certain procedures, to even shadow persons, but when your feet hit the ground, I'm sure you come into your own. So speaking of coming into your own, my younger sister's a nurse. Shout out to her. I see you, sis. She is a BSN RN doing a phenomenal job, and she often tells me about the value of a bedside manner. So I want to ask you, how would you define or describe the Monique Johnson bedside manner? What are your objectives and aims when you are attending to your patients?
So for me, my biggest objective and aim for my bedside manners is making sure the patient feels like they're being listened to.
Mm,
I think as nurses, one of the biggest words I use to describe us are advocates. I feel like we are
okay.
advocates for the patient. So if we're not listening, then we can't properly advocate. And a lot of patients, they are very scared because they feel like someone's not listening, or they don't know how to advocate for themselves. They just listen to everything the doctor says, and
Hmm.
nobody's really looking out for their best interest. So if you're sitting there, and you say, the patient says, well, I'm really hurting right here, and I don't know, I don't want to complain, but I just feel, I'm not gonna say like, okay, well, hang tight,
Right.
I feel like you should be an advocate and say like, okay, well, this person's complaining of this. Like, they don't want to complain, but I'm going to complain on their behalf.
True.
I kind of compare it to like Jesus being our advocate to God in a sense, like
Okay.
the intermediate intercessor type of thing. I feel like we are there to intercede and advocate for the patient. So whether it means we have to harass the doctor to get what we
Right.
want, whether it means we have to harass pharmacy, whatever it is, like, I don't care if anybody else is mad at me. I'm here to provide for my patient. Whereas I think a lot of nurses or people, they don't want to get on the doctor's nerves, or they don't want to annoy CAT scan. I will be knocking on CAT scan door like, hello, my patient needs this CAT scan now,
Yeah.
and sometimes I can annoy other people, but I don't care
Sure.
because I'm advocating for my patient. And the people that you work with, they know that. So even if you're bothering them, they know that this
Hmm.
person actually, like when I work with people, they'll say like, this nurse actually cares about her patient. Like, other nurses and people have told me that, like, if they were sick, they would want me to take care of them. And I always
Wow.
find that to be like a really big honor, especially coming from another person who's in healthcare, because that's not how I'm viewing it. So I don't know. I just think bedside manners is listening to for me, listening to the patient, advocating for them, and then just being honest with them, but being loving. Like, you don't want to be like
Okay.
brutally honest, but if what they're going through is something serious, I'm not gonna sit here
Yeah.
and say like, oh well, you'll be okay. Like, it's not that bad. Um,
Sure.
you can say to them, I'm sorry that you're going through this, and they might, like, I remember I had a patient, and she had had a random like hip dislocation, and she was young. She was like 50. That doesn't just happen to like random people like with no
Hmm.
injury. So they had to do surgery on her. But she was hanging out in the ER, and anyways, they ran some like pre-surgery tests and came to find out that she had HIV, because
Okay.
that's just something that they ran. She had no idea. The doctor goes in there and just drops it on her like, oh yeah, you have HIV. Da, da, da. The lady, I didn't know what was going on. I just see her bawling, crying. And I didn't see anyone else in
Hmm.
the room because the doctor was kind of hidden. And then I was going in there to say what was wrong with her. But then I saw the doctor talking to her. So I was like, okay, I don't know what they're talking about. Um, then the doctor comes out, doesn't tell me that she just dropped this big bomb on this patient. So I'm sitting here wondering, like, what's wrong? So I go to the doctor and I say, hey, like, and then she tells me that the patient has HIV and stuff. So we have to get her for surgery. We're kind of like in this rush thing because now the OR is ready for her. This other nurse comes in the room with me, and she's like, she's crying, she's crying, she's on the floor. She's not even supposed to get out of the bed because her hip is broken. She's patting her
Wow.
on the back. Oh, sweetie, it's okay. It's okay. You know, people live a lot
Right.
longer with HIV these days and everything. And I'm just like, to me, it's so insensitive, like to do that because
Yeah.
to me, it's like, it's not okay for her. You can't tell her it's okay. You know, let her grieve and let her mourn. You don't always have to be like trying to show people the brighter way, you know, like
Hmm.
let them be in their misery for a second if they want to be that. Just be a comforting. I think that's the thing with bedside manners is knowing when to talk and knowing when to just be a presence. Like just
Wow.
be there, you know,
Yeah.
just be there for her. Just be like, I'm sorry, you know, like nobody wants to hear this news. Like you didn't come in here to hear this, you know, you thought something was wrong with
Sure.
your hip. Like I can understand how I would be devastated too. Like this is, you know, and you can just be there. You just encouraging them in that moment, but without encouraging them, just being a presence. And I think a lot of people
Sure.
lack that. They want to rush people to feel better. They want to rush people to like get over, oh, you have cancer, but it's okay. It's not okay. Like,
Right.
you know, like let people not be okay for a little while and just be there for them. So I think that's a really big part of bedside manners.
I think it takes a great deal of thought, intentionality, at times even self-control when you are a nurse, a pastor, or whatever capacity you represent in the helping professions, because that's what we do. We help and we want to resolve, solve, we want to come alongside. And I know for me, it has been definitely a growth experience learning to know when it's just time to be present, when you don't have to figure out something to say. Because I'll be honest, there are times where you don't know what to say. And I can imagine in that moment where this lady's life literally comes to a head. You know, I came in for this. I'm now being confronted with this news and information, and it's not all right. And I think sometimes we can speak with good intentions, but just not really knowing what to say. And sometimes in those moments, anything comes out, and it might not
Yeah.
necessarily be the best thing. I remember one time I went to the hospital and it was after a young man had passed away. I didn't know him, I knew his brother. And he said, "Listen, can you come? My family's all here. We just need somebody to be present." And there were a lot of people in this hospital room. Um, Ironically, the deceased was still on the bed in the room. And the mother was just, and I'm sure you've seen these things before, she was just inconsolable, just on top of her son. And I just stood back and I literally didn't know what to do, what to say. I wanted to say something, um, but I got a sense that no one expected me to say anything. And as I thought about it in hindsight, I said, you know, he asked me just to come. He didn't ask me to say anything. He said, "Can you just come and be here?" And so I'm learning the value of that. Now, let me ask you this, because even as much as you've shared what your approach to bedside manners is, and you've shared an illustration of how that works and how sometimes it can be a difficult thing to recognize what to do. What happens when your patient is belligerent, difficult, shady? You know, I don't want a woman attending to me. I don't want a black person attending to me. Or whatever reason, they're just being, you're too young. Do you know what you're doing? All these kinds of things that people can put up as defense barriers. How do you overcome those to still do your job in a way that is effective?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think for me, to believe it or not, I don't really have a lot of obstacles at the bedside. Even when, you know, I worked in Alabama, I've worked in so many places where sometimes I have patients who are racist. I know they're racist, they know they're racist. And
Yeah.
I go in the room and I'll be like, "Hi, you know, my name's Monique, I'm be your nurse." And they're just kind of like, mm-hmm, you know, like, and then I just
Hmm.
for me, I just it doesn't bother me. I don't know why. I feel like I don't really get bothered by racist people. I'm just kind of like, okay, like I'm not here for that. I'm here to take care of you. So I think it softens them because as I continue to just like they see that I'm still giving them quality of care. I'm asking them, "Hey, would you like
Sure.
something to drink? Do you need another blanket? Like, are you okay?" And I'm still treating them like a normal person. And I think eventually it breaks through to them, like, you know, this person's actually a good nurse.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, she might be black, yeah, I might still be racist, but they can't help but say that this person is treating me good. So I
Sure.
think that's a big thing because I think a lot of times people treat people like how they're being treated. So you get a lot of
Yeah.
belligerent. Like I work in the emergency room. 80% of my patients are belligerent. I always tell people, when you see the ER on the TV, it's nothing like what the ER is in real life. So on the ER and TV, all you see are all of these emergent things coming on all the time, traumas and da 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 da. No, most ERs that only happens 20% of the time. The other
Hmm.
80% of the time is a bunch of just hocus pocus. Like, I mean, it's just, the homeless, God bless the homeless, but they absolutely love the emergency room. They just want somewhere to stay, and they want food, and they will make up anything to stay in there. I'm feeling suicidal. I'm going to kill myself. I have to stay here. But they don't actually, they're not actually feeling that way. They just start throwing stuff. And then when you start to discharge them, they're like, well, I'm having chest pain now. You have to
Right.
keep me. Like, you're not having chest pain, but you can't tell them they're not. You just have to be like, okay, and people are on drugs and people are acting out, and 40% of the people who are in the ER don't want to be in the ER. So
Okay.
then you're trying to convince them, like, hey, you need oh my goodness, just the other day I about had it. I had this lady was calling me out my name, she was cursing at me, she hit me. I mean, and I'm just sitting here like, why are we keeping her? Like, she wants to go, like,
Sheesh.
let her go. We can't force people to stay there. So there's this balance of, like, I can't force you to stay here, but I can try to convince you to stay here all the way until I'm in just total danger.
Okay.
So there's kind of like this cutoff where it's like, okay, you've hit me, okay, maybe I can still try to do this. Maybe I can still try to give you a little bit of maybe drugs if you are cooperative. Like, you can't force drugs on people unless they're like psychiatric. Then if
Hmm.
someone's like psychiatric or suicidal or something like that, then kind of like their rights are a little bit revoked in a legal way. But if they're not and they're completely coherent, you can't just like force stuff on them. So I don't know. So I just think that there's a lot of patience involved
Sure.
with it if you want to do it well. I do find some of my coworkers, when they have a like mean patient, they're just mean back to them. And I'm just kind of like, that doesn't work, like someone's like,
Yeah.
oh, I can't stand you. And someone's like, well, I can't stand you either, but here I am. It's like, oh, okay,
That doesn't
um,
create the most, I'm sure, comfortable environment. But continue.
yeah, it doesn't create the most comfortable environment, but then you have to do it in a way to where the person doesn't think you're just being fake. Because sometimes I'm like super nice to someone that's like cursing me out, and an hour later they're like, "Get out of my face, you this, you fake bee, this boop boop boop," and I'm just like, okay, I'm just being.
Yeah.
But sometimes some patients, it's like this balance of like, you can't be too nice because then they think your niceness is fake, but you can't be like rude. So I'm kind of like
Wow.
stern, nice, rude. It's like really
Sure.
weird. It's just like you're blunt, but like nice with it. Like, but you just kind of have to match that person's energy, but soften it. I don't know. It's just like really weird. It's just this thing that you get when you work there, if you want
Sure.
to. And a lot of people still don't even do it. Like in the ER, it's really funny because in the ER, people always think I'm the nicest person ever. Like my coworkers are like, if you want a nice nurse, go to Monique. She's so nice and da da da.
Hmm.
But in the real world, like when I'm with friends or people, they think I'm mean. So
No.
yeah, so it's really funny because in the nursing ER world, I'm considered nice because of the kind of playground we're in. But
Okay.
in the real world of non-nursing related, people can find me to be mean or insensitive.
Okay.
So it's just
Okay.
really interesting how, like, depending on what your playground is, how you can be like redefined, because I think I'm so used to being so like blunt, like
Hmm.
not even blunt, but just honest. It works in the healthcare world. Apparently it doesn't work as well in the in the non-healthcare world.
Yo, Monique needs some bedside manner outside of the hospital. Like when you're with
Pretty much,
friends, you need some
pretty much.
bedside manner.
Because
Like
you see, if
smooth
you
out
come
the
to me in the
edges.
hospital and you say, am I dying? I'm gonna give you an honest answer. That's kind, but they're gonna like that. If you're a friend
Hmm.
and you come up to me and say, do I look fat in this dress? I'm gonna say, yeah, but like, you know,
Oh
like,
man.
it may not be yeah, but it might be like, do I look fat in this dress? And I might say, like, you don't look fat in the dress, but I don't think it's the best dress for you. I think that a better dress
Okay.
might fit your body type better. And they're just like, and I'm like, was that not the answer you wanted? Like, I don't know. Like,
Now, do you find that you're able to receive the same kind of honesty from your friends?
Oh yeah, I absolutely love it. I actually
Okay.
have like these sit downs and like improvement sessions with people. Even like with my brother, I'll sit down and say like, so like, what do you think I should improve on, or what personality trait of mine do you feel like? And my brother might say, well, I just think that he'll just share something vague, or
Sure.
I am all open for like constructive criticism, or just awareness. I don't know. I just feel like if you ask somebody a question, you should really want an answer. And it doesn't mean that I have to give you a hostile answer and say like, "Oh, yuck," da, 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 but I'm gonna give you the
Yeah.
answer.
Sure.
So apparently, it works in the hospital, doesn't work as well outside of the hospital.
Sure. And I appreciate that comparison, because I think at times we can easily not observe the differences in ourselves, or at least perception and what we can learn about ourselves in the social space, family space versus professional space. And sometimes those intersections can
Mhm.
often create some blurred lines and even kind of a sense of identity, uh, maybe not crisis, but just, okay, here, this is the response I'm getting, but there, this is the response I'm getting. So, how do I reconcile the two? And as helpers, it's easy to provide answers to questions, advice, and counsel, the shoulder people lean on, but not everyone can then receive the same things, so that you have a kind of a holistic approach to say, no, I don't just offer constructive criticism. I'm able to, and I actually can seek it out because I want to become a better person all around. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, think you think it's pretty cool, but
But in real life, you're like,
that's
it
how
don't
people.
always feel cool.
Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, never mind. So
Sure. So, help me out with the nursing schedule. What did that take some time to acclimate to? Because from my understanding, it's not always your normal 8 to 5. They're 12-hour shifts. You're not necessarily working 7 days a week. Well, I don't want to assume. Help me out. What's the nursing schedule like? How do you become accustomed to that?
yeah, so the schedule actually varies depending on your specialty. So like when you
Okay.
work like a lot of bedside nursing, the floor, med surge, ER, ICU, places like that, you're typically on a standard 12-hour shift. Typically it's a 7 to 7 12-hour shift. In the ER, because it's open like 24 hours and always moving, there are sometimes different shifts where it's like instead of being 7 to 7, you can be a 9 to 9 or an 11 to
Mhm.
11 or 3 to 3. Sometimes certain ERs have different shifts like that, but if you're doing something like surgery, outpatient center, doctor's office, outpatient surgery, endoscopy, sometimes you can have a more 5 days a week, uh 7 to 3, something like
Sure.
that type of schedule, 5 days a week, no weekends. But most for the hospital people, those nurses are usually all working for the most part 12-hour shifts, 7 to 7. It's the most common shift. Supposed
Okay.
to be 3 days a week. So it took a lot of acclimation
Mhm.
to just really get used to that. A lot of people say, oh well, you only work 3 days and you're off for 4. Oh my gosh, I wish I had that. But the beating that you get in those 3 days, you just need so much time to recover. It's like the
Sure.
weirdest thing. I don't know if I'm just weak. Maybe I'm just weak minded or just a punk, but I just my whole nursing career, I've been nurse for almost 9 years. And the whole
Wow.
time, I have never worked, I don't even work 3 in a row. I always split mine up, like maybe like
Okay.
if I do Monday, Tuesday, and then like Thursday. I hate doing some nurses of doing all three, and then they'll take like 6 days off and do three again, and then just take
Right.
5 days off and do three again. They love doing their three. Oh, not me. If you need to go to the post office, if you need to run any errand, if you want to catch dinner with someone, if you want to go to prayer meeting, like I would miss prayer meeting. I'd be so heartbroken because those days you just don't exist. It covers you're getting ready for work at 5:30 in the morning and you get off at 7:30. By the time you actually leave and get home or whatever, it's 8:30, depending how far you live. The day is done. You've missed breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Wow.
all events. Like I don't like it personally for me.
Sure.
Um, so it does, that is how it is. For some people, they love it. I think people with like kids and stuff, they really like it because it gives them that flexibility to be home a lot more and stuff like that. Um, but I did start doing this year with COVID and everything like that. I've worked the most I've ever worked in my life. And it really just taught me that like I'm so much stronger than I guess I thought I was. Cause let me tell
Wow.
you, I never worked 3 in a row. And then here I am working like 21, 22 days in a row, 12-hour shifts. Just like, I'm like,
Sure.
wow, I didn't know I could do that. So it's like, I'm impressed with myself. And I think even like after COVID finishes, I will probably be able to work those 3 days like a piece of cake now, because
Right.
it's gonna be just like, oh, 3 days, that's it. Like, oh, I can do this. So it's interesting. But I also worked like surgery for a while, like before COVID, where I was working 5 days a week, 8-hour shifts. I
Okay.
personally like that the most. It's 5 days a week. You come in, you know your schedule, 7 to 3, whatever it may be. You get off. You have the whole later afternoon into evening available. If you have children, you can pick them from school. You can do stuff with them. You can cook dinner. If your friend wants to go out for dinner, you can do. I just feel like as far as a quality of life goes, like you can go to the gym every day at this time. It's more consistent. I feel like with the whole 3 days a week thing, it's not as consistent. You don't always work the same 3 days. So this week it might be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Next week it might be Tuesday, Thursday. So like you can't say every Thursday I'm going to do this at 6 o'clock,
Sure.
because you might be at work. So
Sure. Okay. So, at what point do you make a decision to transition from single location nursing to travel nursing?
um I think it depends. It depends on what you're looking for. So travel nursing, there's two things that make travel nursing different from just stationary nursing. One is you get different pay. So the pay is
Okay.
different. Two, you get to travel. So some people
Right.
decide I want to be a travel nurse because they just like to travel, and they just say like, here's an opportunity for me to be able to travel. Or two, some people are saying, where I'm working at right now, they're really not paying me enough money at all. Let me just pick up one of these travel assignments and make more money. So those are usually the two determining factors that make people decide to travel.
Okay. And for you, was it immediate after you did your 2 years in single location? Did you transition right away? Was it longer than that? And with the reasons you shared, they apply to you as well? Like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to go and
Yeah.
change it up.
So when I first became a nurse, I was in Indiana.
Okay.
And I was working at a hospital in Indianapolis, and there was a nurse there working with me. She was running up on her 2 years. And she was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to travel nurse. And I really like working with her. And I was like, oh, where are you
Hmm.
going? She was a sister. I said, no, stay here with me. And she was like, I'm gonna do this travel nursing. And that was kind of like, I think, the first time I had heard of it. Because
Sure.
now it's more popular, but it wasn't as popular back when, even 10 years ago, it wasn't as known.
Okay.
And so I was like, what? And she was like telling me about it. So that's when I first like heard of it. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And she was like, yeah, you can't do it until you've been a nurse for 2 years. Well, I was just a new nurse. I was probably a nurse for 5 months at that point when she said
Right.
that. So I did 1 year in Indiana, like a year and a half, and then I moved back to Alabama and Huntsville, and I started working ER. Huntsville pays so bad. Their pay is absolutely terrible for nurses. I don't know
Wow.
how they expect people to live. You can make almost the same amount of money as a nurse in Huntsville as you can being a manager at Burger King.
Serious.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. So when I came to Huntsville and started working as a nurse again, my pay was so bad. I was looking at my paycheck like, yeah, this is not the move, because like I'm doing is paying for my apartment. I didn't even have that many bills, but I remember
Right.
something happened to my car. Something happened to my car and I needed to chunk out like $600 or $700 to pay for it. And I just did not have it. Like I was just like, I don't have $600, $700. Like I can't even save like how I wanted to. And
Sure.
I ended up having to put it on my credit card, which was like a big no for me, because I had credit cards, but I never actually put a balance on them. I always paid them off. I actually
Sure.
had a balance on my credit card for the first time in like 6 years. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna like die as an adult. Like I'm being irresponsible. And it was all downhill from there. I was just like,
Mm.
I can't live in this type of financial thing. And I like to travel. I was always traveling. So then I decided, you know what, now's the time. I was a nurse for like 2.5 years. I said, I have the experience. My lease is ending in my apartment. Like now's the time to do it. So that
Let's
I
go.
kind of had both reasons
Okay.
motivated me to do it.
Okay. So, what have what's your most random assignment been, or most random location as a travel nurse? And how many places have you been so far?
I would say my most random location was Nome, Alaska. So I was living in Nome, Alaska for a few
Whoa.
months.
Where
Yeah.
is that?
It is in rural Alaska over there, like near Russia. It's the population's like 2,000, and I didn't never saw 2,000 people,
Wow.
so I don't know where they got that from. But that was definitely my most just unique, random. I could write a book on that experience, type
Sure.
of thing. And I think for me, I've been to I think I've worked in 14 different states and cities. So
Wow.
it's been a really great experience just seeing the different types of people everywhere. It's yeah.
So would you say nursing in one location is nursing in another, or are people in the north different than people in the south, from the east or west, or is it a blend of both?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a great question. I think like I said, I'm mostly ER, so the ER is the same everywhere. If
Okay.
I'm working on a trauma in Miami, if I'm working on a trauma in New York, pretty much the same
Hmm.
process, a little bit of different things, but you can just someone with stomach pain in Florida, I'm going to treat them the same as someone in stomach pain with New York. We're going to do the same workup. The hospital
Hmm.
might have a different like policy, little nitpicky stuff here and there. The doctor might order like this instead of that, but they're both an antibiotic. It's just little things. But I prefer to work on the West Coast than I do on the East Coast. The people
Okay.
on the East Coast, no offense, because I am in Florida right now, are way more unhealthy than the people on the West Coast. The
Really?
lifestyle, oh my goodness. I mean, when I work on the East Coast, Alabama, oh my goodness, I absolutely love working in Alabama. Shout out to Huntsville Hospital. It's my favorite ER to work in to this date.
Even
Um,
though they don't pay much, is your
Even though
favorite?
they don't pay much. It's
Okay.
so depressing because I absolutely love Huntsville. I love the hospital, but I cannot stay there because the pay
Sure.
is atrocious. Um, they're like behind. Like I can go and work in California and literally get double the pay, more than double, like
Mm,
60% of the pay that I would be making in Huntsville. It's ridiculous. But that's a
yeah.
whole nother topic. They monopolize things. There's like one major hospital there. It's Alabama. They consider cost of living lower, but it's really not that much lower. So it's just like all of these reasons. But Huntsville Hospital is my favorite place to work. But I'm glad that that was my first ER that I worked at. The people there are sick. And I didn't realize they were sick. I just thought that this was
Wow.
normal because that was my first ER. I mean, there's something they call the triangle of death. It's like high blood pressure, cholesterol, and diabetes. And
Hmm.
I would say maybe 95%, okay, 90, maybe 90% of our patients that came into the ER all had that. So everybody
Wow.
was like very sick. A lot of people were on dialysis. A lot of people, the diet is just I've learned that in areas that I go to where there's more like ignorance, or if the diet is just not as good, or the people are not as I don't know if it's like, education plays a role, and just all of these, socioeconomical things that come into place. They're just less aware. And so when I
Sure.
work on and then cultural things, right? So my people, I'm Jamaican, and then, Caribbean people, Spanish people, Black people, we season our food.
Very much so.
They're putting salt and adobo and curry and jerk sauce and all and cheese and all of these things, which taste really good, but they're really bad. They can be very bad for our health. So I find that the places where there are an abundance of those people, so if there's more like um Caribbean, Black, Hispanic people in that area, unfortunately, it's going to be a very unhealthy area. So if you
Mm,
go over to the West Coast now, where there's not a whole lot, like let's take Seattle, Washington, or let's take Northern California or something. There's not as many Caribbean, Black or Hispanic people in those little pockets of areas compared to the East Coast, Florida,
sure.
New York, Georgia, Alabama. So when the people come to the ER, I remember I was working in San Francisco, California, like a few years ago, and I never checked a blood sugar. I didn't check anyone's blood sugar for like
Wow.
4 or 5 weeks. I was completely baffled. I'm like, does nobody here have diabetes? Like, when I'm on the East Coast, I check a blood sugar like 5 times a day.
Yeah, it's
Everybody needs a blood sugar.
routine.
You just walk in the room with it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, I didn't even know what their blood sugar machine was because like so many people weren't diabetic. Um, people out there, they just are more aware. They're more health aware. They're more health conscious. It's just a different type of lifestyle that they live over there. And
Sure.
so you remember how earlier I was telling you that 80% of the people that come to the ER are a bunch of hocus pocus and 20% are actually real. I find that on the West Coast, it's the opposite.
Okay.
Not just, I can't say West Coast, so I can't generalize because there's certain parts in like Southern California and other places that do have it. But just speaking of like whether like places I've been like San Francisco, northern Washington, stuff like that, it's just different. And I find that the ERs are the opposite, where 80% of the stuff that come in are actually kind of emergent, and 20% is kind of like hocus pocus,
Okay.
excluding the homeless out of that
Sure.
ratio, because homeless people are, the ER is the homeless people's home.
Sure.
So yeah, I definitely think it's very different. It's very culturally different. Um, you have to really, for example, over here in Miami, Florida, we don't have a whole lot of Asian people down here, right? But when I went to San Francisco, there were most of my patients were Asian. So then I had
Mm.
to learn how to serve the Asian population and the illnesses that they present to the most. So um
Wow.
for example, this is one thing I really appreciate about Oakwood University. Their nursing program, to me, I know earlier I said it doesn't really matter which nursing program you go to, just go to one if there's like a long waiting list. I still think that's true. But Oakwood's nursing program was all about like um, a very holistic overview.
Yeah.
So they teach you things that, like, when I got out of school, other nurses would be like, how do you know that? And I'm like, you didn't learn that in like transcultural nursing in your school? They're like, we didn't have that class. Oakwood really gives you these classes that you really don't need. Like, we had to take a whole class on ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why do I need this? Oh my goodness, I use that on a daily basis. We took a transcultural nursing class. We just took all of these classes that I guess you don't need them to be a nurse,
Mm-hmm.
but they're helpful. And so I found that, like, ethical dilemmas, when someone says, I don't want this treatment, and you're like, no, I think it's best. They don't want the treatment. You know what I'm saying? Like, you
Sure.
have to honor that. You don't want to live and you want to be a do not resuscitate and you're 42 years old. I think that's kind of young, but I have to respect your wishes. I can't change it. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So we learned a lot about different cultures in at Oakwood. We had a whole class on it. And I thought it was funny because I'm like, I'm never going to use this, but oh my goodness, I use it all the time. Like,
Wow.
I used it when I was in Alaska. The book taught us about Alaskan people, Appalachian like just random mountain people, Asians. And one of the things I remember I had learned at Oakwood about like Asian population was that they're very stoic. Not all
Okay.
of them, you can't really generalize, but their whole thing was they're stoic people. So when they're sick, they don't want to like say that they're in pain. Like, they don't want to do all of that stuff. They usually
Right.
come to the hospital with like a whole clan, like 5, 6, 7 people. So I remember one time, like when I was in California, I had an Asian patient, and I knew he was in pain. I knew he was in a whole lot of pain. His blood pressure was like skyrocketed. His heart rate was like over 100. It was like 110, and he had no cardiac problems. And
Mm.
I said, I knew for whatever thing he was coming in there for, it was a painful thing. And I said, are you in pain? No, no, good. And the other nurse was covering me for breaks. She goes, I was trying to give him pain medicine. He said he didn't want it. So I just returned it. And I was like, no, he's in pain. So his family had stepped out to like go do something. And so I went up to him and I just said, Mr. So-and-so, I know you're in pain. Like, I can see that you're in pain based on your vital signs. I will give you pain medicine. I will not tell your family that I gave you pain medicine. I will give it to you while they're not in here. And he just looked at me and he was just like, okay,
Let's do it.
and he took it. But
Yeah.
my thing is, that's something that I learned from school, that they would be
Right.
very stoic. Whereas the other nurses were like, oh, he said he doesn't want it, I'm going to go return it. But I knew that it was because his family was there and he wanted to kind of portray that hard image. So I gave it to him and didn't tell his family. His family came back and it just continued on like normal. And that's,
Sure.
you establish that relationship and that trust with your patient more like that too.
So it requires a great deal of discernment on a regular basis when you are serving as a nurse. But also over the past several months, I think that nurses and other frontline workers have had to employ a level of discernment in terms of the national and even global context that we've been thrust into with COVID. You recently completed a 21-day stint in New York City, one of the cities most impacted by COVID. While a number of nurses, I might venture to say hundreds, were saying, there's no way in the world I'm going to New York. You plunged in. Was there apprehension initially where you were like, I was built for this? And what was the experience like?
Yeah. So I will say this. So, like, I was travel nursing last year, October. I stopped. I said, I just want to live a regular life. Like, I just
Okay.
want to just relax. Because I don't have any husband or any kids, it's really
Mhm.
difficult for me to settle myself down, because I'm just like, what am I doing settling down? Like, for what? So
Sure.
I'm like, I'm going to go, I'm going to relax. I'm going to get a full-time job. So that's what I did. Came home, got me a little cute job at the surgery center, like minimal stress, great schedule, just living my best life, going to the gym. And you know what I kind of felt like, in Avengers when not saying I'm a superhero or anything, but in Avengers when Iron Man, he like, I don't know if you watch Avengers, but Iron Man decided that he didn't want to like be a part of the Avengers anymore. He had gotten like a wife, he had
Yep.
a daughter, and
A
he just
daughter.
wanted to relax. He moved out into the
The
hills.
country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I was like. And the
Sure.
Avengers came back to him and said, "Hey, we need you to come." And he was like, "Listen, nah, like I'm good. I'm living a good life over here. I'm comfortable." When I saw that movie, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's me," because that's how I felt. I was just like chilling, and
Mhm.
they came and they said, "COVID's here," and I said, "Oh, sounds like a personal problem. I'm gonna sit right back here at my popcorn." And
That's real. That's real. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
I
Yeah.
was just like, okay, like that has nothing to do with me. And then I kept seeing on the news, we need nurses. And I was like, oh boy, I'm sure y'all will get them, Yeah, exactly. And so I was literally just like in my head, I was like, this has nothing to do with me. And so much so, I was even everybody, they were like, stay home. I was like, oh my gosh, flights are cheap right now. I was like flying places for $15. I know I'm like a terrible example. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to Orlando this weekend, $10 flight. Oh, great. Flights were empty. I mean, I was just taking advantage of the whole thing. And I actually went to Deltona, Florida to visit a friend because her birthday was coming up and all of her birthday plans got canceled. She was supposed to go like to Spain. And I just felt bad for her because she was like just really sad about it. She had no friends near. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna go to Orlando. So I went there, me, a friend, and another friend. So my other friend was there and she was like, yeah, I'm going to go to New York to help out with COVID. And I was like, really? Like, why would you do that? And then I'm watching the news and everybody's up. And I sat there and I said, there's some people going out to serve and they're not even an ER nurse. They're like a labor and delivery nurse. There's no shade to the labor and delivery nurse. It's just that they don't even work with adults. You know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
they don't e, there's people that don't even know how to travel or how to even accommodate to different situations, and they are making the sacrifice to do it. And here I
Mhm.
am, probably one of the most qualified people to actually do it. I work ER, I work with adults, I've traveled, I know how to like just work in different settings, and I'm just like, I started to have this feeling of like I'm super qualified, but I'm not doing it. And then I just started to feel bad
Mm.
because I'm like, but God, I don't want to go. I kind of felt like Jonah.
Sure.
I just started.
That's actually what I thought about when you were talking about you were flying everywhere. Like we got a Jonah or Jonette out here flying everywhere but New York. The weight of conviction is upon you. Your friends are going. But I hear you in terms of, nurses, whatever their concentration is. If they're not ER, labor and delivery and other fields, like labor and delivery, they work with adult parents, moms, but the primary focus might be different than ER, right?
And just a
So
different
you're
focus.
flying everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
all together. So
yeah,
you get that right. You're saying, yo, people are coming and nurses are going from various specialties. I have a specialty that is like tailor-made for this. This is an emergency, but I'm good. I'm eating my popcorn. I'm gonna travel and chill. So what happens? What's the straw? What whale comes and swallows you up? And you're like, okay, now it's time for me to pray. I'm in the belly of the whale.
pretty much. I was just sitting there. I only knew one person that was going to go help, so she went to go help, and I was like, great. And she was all nervous, like, I don't know, what if this, what if that, and I was like, who cares? You can do it. It's literally 3 weeks. Like,
Mhm.
it can be the worst thing ever. You're going to be able to tolerate it. But I have that mindset because I've travel nurse and I've been in most places that need a travel nurse is not a great place to work, or else they wouldn't need
Okay,
a travel nurse. You know what
sure.
I'm saying? So I'm used to just being in bad situations. And when I was telling her that, and I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't even be nervous. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm not nervous. I'm equipped. I'm equipped. I said, I was like,
I'm
oh my
available.
God, I'm available. Oh, so that's the thing. So my job, my great and easy job, decided to put people into furlough,
Okay.
which is, for people who don't know what furlough is, it's kind of like you don't get laid off. You kind of you get to keep your job still and keep the benefits, but you can't use your PTO, you can't use your pay time off or earn time off. but you still get to like keep insurance and stuff like that. So it's kind of good. But they put us in furlough. So now I didn't even have a job because I wasn't working. So I'm like free. I don't have a job. I have the experience. I just feel like the Lord just was like setting everything up. Like, look, you have no reason to not go.
Mm.
So I was like, all right, Lord, like I will call. Cause not only the craziest part is not only do I not want to go, but in order to go, you have to like blaze up this hotline and use all these hours of your day to like get in.
Oh,
It's
wow.
it's the craziest thing. So it's like you already don't want to go, and then you have to like put in all this work to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, God, I'm gonna call. And they were kind of like, they would tell you there's this website and it tells you like call now, like this is when you call. And so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna call now. Lines are open. I called over 3,000 times. I called for over 4 hours. My friend called on her
Wow.
phone. I was in Orlando driving back to Miami. It was a 4 hour drive. I was calling also the whole time, just call, hang up, call, hang up, call, hang up, thousands of times. And I said, oh, what do you know, Lord? Looks like I'm not getting in. Like I tried, like I gave it my full effort. And literally I was driving and someone said hello. Then I was like, oh dang, someone answered. Like I was kind of like sad that someone answered. And so she was like, you just made it in, like I was like one of the last people to make it in. I was like,
Mm.
great. So I made it in and they I had to leave the next day. So I just like ran home real quick, packed up my stuff, kind of told my mom and my brothers, and nobody wanted me to go. My mom was like, why would you do that? Think about how detrimental that'll be for your
I
mental
was gonna
health.
ask whether or not you had family or friends who were trying to block,
Zero
like, no,
support.
don't do it. Yeah.
Nobody, everybody was like, my brother was like, are you sure you want to? Because, right now people are not as afraid as COVID. But when it
Hmm.
first came out, people were so afraid. It was like this, what is this? Nobody was really supporting me. Everybody was like, are you sure you want to go and do that? Like my mom's like, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, I wouldn't go. If I were you, I wouldn't go. I'm like, but guess what? You're not me. So I'm going. That's the part that I'm talking about. People don't like.
Right, like smooth it out, smooth it out. So, hey, Monique put her bag over her shoulder. I'll see y'all later.
Right. I was like, I'll call you, I'll keep you informed, but like I will go. So I just went, and that was that.
So, 21 days in New York. uh, From an
I
outsider's
ended up spending like
perspective,
35, by the way. I ended up staying even longer.
really.
Yeah.
Now, was the extra like vacation when you're like, well, I'm in New York, I'm gonna chill, or was the
No, it was
extra
it was for
time? No,
the work.
you
Yeah. So
okay,
after 21 days,
okay.
they were like, "Can you do longer?" And I was like, yeah, I don't know
And
how
is
long
it
it'll last."
so? You said this is every day now for these 21 to
Mhm.
35 days.
After
So,
my
what's it like?
21 days, they did give me 2 days off in between. I was like, "Thank the good
Okay.
Lord," and then I
Do
started
you have
back
to
again.
rent a Do you have to rent a car, provide your own lodging, or do they provide transportation to and from your place of lodging to the hospital? Is it hectic, or is it like, so there's the national narrative of COVID in New York. Yes, there was some pockets where it was high octane, or were there moments where you can kind of catch your breath, or you going all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it was great because they took care of everything. So you didn't have to worry about taking care of anything. You didn't have the time to. So like they took care of your housing. So as soon as you got off the plane, you had to get your own Uber or taxi, whatever, to the hotel. But then we had the whole hotel. The whole hotel was only for us. So you weren't
Hmm.
sharing it with like non-COVID people. So it was literally just like a COVID nurse hotel, which was great. They had food for us every day, lunch, dinner.
Mm.
A bus took us to work. So like you didn't have to worry about like, oh, what am I gonna go? I mean, if you didn't like the food, you could try to go find your own food. But you have to remember too, a lot of these food places were closed down in New York because the place was a complete ghost town.
Sure.
So I mean, like a lot of food places were closed. So I don't know. It was like they took care of everything: food, travel. They made it. They tried to make it as easy as possible for us. And something I really appreciated too was like when we came back to the hotel after work every day, they had pastors and counselors in the lobby. So if we
Wow.
needed to talk to anybody or anything like that, I never used the services, but I did see some nurses sometimes just crying like in the arms of one of the counselors or pastors. They had I served during Easter as well. So like people who were Catholic or who did communion or whatever, they were doing communion in the lobby one morning. I was like, oh, this is great.
Sure.
They were just really trying to provide to us on all levels so that we didn't feel like deficient. And then we had people, random people and their children and people were sending stuff to the hotel, just like, thank you so much for your services. And like their kids would draw stuff and just, they would just do things to just try to keep you going, knowing that it was like a rough time. The ER in New York was just, I wasn't expecting it. In my head, I was expecting something else because I'm like, I've worked in a lot of crazy places. And then I got there and I was like, yeah, never mind. You know, I was like, what is this? Like, I've even worked in New York twice before in the New York ER. So I know that New York ERs are a different breed. Any nurse that works in New York ER, hats off to you. I can never do it forever. The ratios are out of this world. It's just not good. But when I went and walked into that ER for the first time, I will never forget it. I was like, the smell, it was atrocious. It smelled so bad because most people with COVID, they were like having diarrhea and all this stuff. There
Wow.
was bowel movement all over the floor in the ER everywhere. There was people all, I mean, we in the ER, we usually use hallway beds anyway. But I mean, this was different. There was patients like all through the hallway. Like you can even walk, like bunked up in like the med room, like on the med room and by the nursing station. And like if the ER, let's say the ER could hold, like I think that ER had like 45 beds. We had the first time I went there, we had 120 patients in the ER, but a 40 bed ER.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like triple the amount
Yeah.
of beds that it can hold. So people were coughing. I mean, it was just bad. It was just the picture that I walked into. There's blood on the floor. There's bowel movement on the floor. There's people grabbing me, people in their bed, like help, grabbing at my clothes. Like I felt like I was in a third world country. Like I just felt very like biblical, like Jesus in the, I don't know. It just felt really like I've never in my life just been walking through an ER and people are just grabbing at you, like help me, no, help me, and like falling out the bed and bleeding and bowel. I was like, what in the world? I was like, then I couldn't breathe because I had on like 2 masks and all this stuff. So I'm like about to have a panic attack and I can't even breathe in peace. I'll never forget that first day. I was just like, yeah, I don't know about this. You know, we were just like, it was like a few of us walking into that, like,
Yeah.
I had to leave. Like they were trying to show me something. I was like, be right back. And I had to like leave, run out the ER because I just needed to like breathe. So I ran out the ER outside thinking that I was gonna be able to breathe. But I ran out and there was all these ambulances lined up with COVID people. So I'm like, oh, I can't breathe. So then I ran to the like side because I wanted to take off my mask because of fresh air. And then there's this big truck with all these dead bodies. And I'm like, where do I go to breathe? Like
Wow.
I like, so it was really just like, I think that first day was just really overwhelming for me because I couldn't even find anywhere to like just breathe. Like if you want to take your mask off and just like I don't know. But then I think it's all a mindset thing. Eventually you have to pray and just like,
Sure.
all right, Monique, you can do this. There are people here doing this. So like you can too. Relax. So I just had to like pep talk myself and just get it together and just get focused. But it was interesting experience.
So how are they, in addition to, of course, the PPE, were you having to get COVID testing every day? I think I saw a video you posted once about there was something that they provided where you could step on with your shoes and have it clean your shoes. So how are they catering to your health while you're there? And then when you leave, do you have to get testing and then quarantine when you get back to Florida? Because like you said, you're exposed every day. So what's the protective measures that you're taking or
Yeah,
that they
they're
took for you?
actually pretty good about it. You know, on the news they were talking about people not having equipment and stuff, but they had it. They had equipment for us every day. They gave us a new mask every day, which was a big thing at first. Because a
Okay.
few nurses at the hospital I was at, so the hospital that I was at was one of the hospitals that got hit the hardest out there.
Wow.
So a few of the nurses at that hospital did die, and a few of the nurses that I work with, or some of the people I work with, did pass away. So it was quite an interesting thing. They lost like one of their head nurses in the ER. So it was just really kind of like sad. But they had because people were passing away stuff, they passed this new thing and they sent this right when I got there, thank the good Lord, they sent this massive shipment of masks to New York. So
Mm.
now they were able to give us a new mask every day. Before they were having to use the same mask for like 3 or 5 days.
Wow.
So yeah, so they were really good about giving us equipment. As far as COVID testing, it wasn't a requirement to be COVID tested, but if you wanted to be tested, like you could be tested.
Okay.
Um, and then yes, when we finished, they did send us home to quarantine. We had to quarantine for 2 weeks. So that was, and then so that was good. So like I don't know, they were they were doing the best that they could at the time. I didn't feel like I felt unsafe.
Sure. Listen, our hearts go out to all of the families of persons who have been impacted and who've lost loved ones, whether patients who are not nurses, and definitely the nurses and other frontline workers. We do appreciate you and the persons who are placing their lives on the line. So I want to ask you this. Um, how do you respond to persons who have suspicion or have questioned what's actually going on in hospitals? Because I get the sense that, and I understand that there's kind of this shutdown. That was a something I had to get used to as a pastor, whether I had a member who contracted the virus or members who had other health ailments. And at the beginning, it was like no visitors allowed, not even family members. Then there was, right now, it's just one person. And so there was now, for however much suspicion or uncertainty there was about what goes on behind closed doors under normal circumstances, even more so now, people are like, wait a minute, what's going on? We don't really know. All of a sudden, my loved one went in and they didn't come out. And, now people are grieving and they're hurting. And sometimes they can direct, I would imagine, that hurt, grief, pain, anger, and other emotions toward nurses and physicians. So for persons who have questioned you or have said you all are even, maybe some have even accused you, saying you guys are infecting people in the hospital or even killing them, that can be a difficult thing to respond to. How have you processed that? How have you engaged with people who might feel that way?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I actually made a whole video on my YouTube addressing that specific thing,
Okay. Okay.
kind of like, because my thing is this. One, there was a lot of things that happened with COVID, like you said, the whole visitor thing. So one thing that I try to do about that, when patients came in, I would try to make it a thing that they can always see their family member. So FaceTime, phones, like people would say to me, oh, because the thing about nursing is they wanted you to limit your exposure. Okay, so this is the benefit of working in New York. All other places, they're like, limit your exposure in the COVID rooms, because other hospitals had like one or two or three or four or five COVID patients, and that was it. So they were able
Sure.
to contain them, confine them to an area. But in New York, everybody had COVID. So there was
Mhm.
no limit your exposure. I'm in the hallway getting exposed. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm outside getting exposed. There was no limit your exposure. You're just exposed 24, like around the clock, So that kind of made it a little bit easier in a sense, because I didn't have to worry about taking on, taking off, taking on, because everybody had COVID. So when I went into a room, it's like I don't mind taking your phone that probably has COVID on it and calling your family and staying in your room for an extra 10 minutes so that your family can see you or talk to you, because limit my exposure doesn't matter. When I go in the hallway, my exposure is still there too.
That's close. Right.
But I think a lot of other hospitals, the nurses, because even my other friends that started working COVID at others in other states, they would tell me how their hospital did it. And I'm like, wow, that sounds very efficient. But it was very like stay in the room for less than 90 seconds.
Sure.
You can't really give compassion in less than 90 seconds. You can't give care or be an air for somebody. So it made it even more lonely for the COVID people, because now I don't even want to be in your room. Hi, how you doing?
Right.
Here's your med. Da, 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 da. All right, bye. Gotta go. Because you want to limit your exposure. But in New York, you didn't limit your exposure.
Mhm.
So if I had that extra, which I never actually had the extra time, but if I had, I would just make the extra time and call their family, or sometimes just go to the desk, call their family member, tell them how they're doing, because try to use a FaceTime. There was even one time I used my own phone because the patient's phone was dead and she didn't know where her thing. And I just said, what's the number? And call them on my phone. And people were like, oh, why would you use your phone? I just wiped it off. I just used some bleach stuff. And, because that person might have passed away. And why would I take that opportunity from this person to try to, talk
Wow.
to them? So I think there's a lot of people, it's kind of a catch-22, because healthcare providers are too scared, or too not scared, but very protectant of themselves. And sometimes it just
Sure.
gets in the way of actually caring for the patient emotionally.
Sure.
And then of course, you have the people, like you said, saying, you guys are doing this, you guys are killing, you guys are doing that. I don't know why the Lord made me in such a way that things don't bother me. Like
Mhm.
people don't bother me. Like people talking about me don't bother me. Racist people don't bother me. People saying this, that don't bother me, because I'm just like, you can't know everything. And you have to be okay knowing that you don't know everything. And I think that's where people
Mm.
can't can't get to that. They want to know everything. And I have quite a few friends that are atheists or agnostic, and I absolutely love them. But a lot of my friends who are agnostic, that's why they are agnostic or atheists, is because they just gotta, some of them just have to know the reason why this doesn't make sense. This story doesn't make
Sure.
sense. So there's no God. And I'm like, I don't argue biblically with people. I don't say, look at the Bible. It says, I'm just like, listen, it doesn't make sense to me either. You know what I'm saying? But
Right.
I'm just gonna exercise my faith and believe that it happened. And when God gets to heaven, I'm just gonna ask God, like, what was up with this story? Because it didn't make any sense. I'm okay not knowing, and I'm okay not having the answer for everything. And I think that when people ask me, like, is it true, is it fake, and I just tell people, like, healthcare is new. Like, CPR was just originated like in the 1950s. Prior to that,
Wow.
when people dropped on the floor, can you imagine that? Like, our parents were probably born, and your parents, my parents were probably born around that time. If people would drop to the floor, we were just looking at them like, phantom, maybe just thump them. There was no actual programming of what to do.
Sure.
That just started. People don't realize that that just happened. Healthcare is new because we're America. We have these very high expectations of America healthcare. But when this pandemic came, we started operating on a second world, third world country type of thing. And so,
Wow.
according to the American standards, it wasn't as efficient as the American standards. But that's what you have to do. Back in the day, ambulance drivers, you used to be like the funeral drivers. Like, it used to be a
Sure.
similar thing. But
Sure.
now we've gotten so used to ambulance drivers in America are certified and this and that and that and that. We've become so bougie in our healthcare because we do have great healthcare, which is why our insurance is so
Hmm.
high and why we don't have free healthcare, is because we do have amazing healthcare. If I ever got sick, I would want to get sick in America. But we started operating like a third world country, and America started bashing America for it, because I don't know if you ever seen
Wow.
those memes where it was saying, like, America is just like a third world country with a Gucci belt. Like, it was just like really like stupid stuff. But so we started operating in a way that wasn't ideal, right? So
Okay.
instead of having one patient in a room, we now had three patients in a room or two patients in a room, because, like, we don't have the room,
Right.
like, we can't give you that courtesy anymore. And people are like, well, you're cross contaminating diseases. And it's like, hey, that might be true. But if they all have the same disease, then we might just get away with putting them all in the same room because we don't have the room. So, like, what do we do? So we started operating in a very, like, we don't have the resources, we don't have the space, we have to do what we have to do. And I will say, it wasn't always the safest option, but
Sure.
you can't operate the safest or the best when you are lacking all of the resources and you're getting diagnosed. You have thousands of new diagnoses of this disease happening every day.
Sure.
So, and then, so I just felt like I never made it a point to argue with people or tell them or try to prove to them that we're not killing people, because honestly, there probably has been some people that died due to the not as good care from the
Yeah.
providers, because okay, this doctor was taking, or this nurse was taking care of 15 patients versus taking care of usually three or four. So sure,
Sure.
one of them might have gotten neglected because they were in this other room for a long time, and that could have caused that other person to pass away. These things are possible because you were lacking the resources, you were lacking the staff, you were lacking all of these things. And that's why they were trying to bring in more people, that's why they were trying to bring in more resources. But until those additional people or additional resources came in, there might have been certain deaths that could have otherwise been prevented if they weren't lacking all of that. Um,
Sure.
so I mean, I don't really argue with people who try to say, like, I try to point them a different perspective and show them what a different perspective might be. Not saying that it's okay that people have died. I think it's very terrible that people have had to pass away to this disease. And in addition to that, I think something that made it very challenging was we were treating a disease that we were also learning about, which I think was
Mm. Wow.
very new for us. Because when you think about it, the diseases that we usually treat, we already know about. So we're treating
Mhm.
diabetes, right? We're treating high blood pressure, we're treating heart attacks, we're treating strokes. We already know about these things. They've been around for a while. Research has already been conducted on what the best thing to do is. And even though it's continually progressing, we already knew about it. COVID, we don't even know about it. And we're trying to treat something we don't even know about.
Mm.
So it was a very interesting thing, because you had to be very your ability to change had to be very, like, adaptive, because
Sure.
today they might say, hey guys, we have to give this medicine because this is what the new medicine is for COVID, and we're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, And then 2 days later, they're like, stop doing that. We're not doing that anymore. And I'm like, wait, what? And some nurses would get mad because they'd be like, you just told us to do it like this and we're doing it like this. And now you're telling us, make up your mind. And it's like, you can't look at it like a make up your mind thing. It's a, people are constantly trying to do a rapid research, which is already unsafe because you just can't research this thing so quickly. You know, they're already trying to do a rapid research to try to find cures and treatments for this thing. So yes, it's going to be ever changing. So the treatment
Right.
that we're using on COVID today, heck, halfway through my shift, I might be 8 hours in and this already switched and I'm doing something different. It was a constant, I had never been in a situation like that before where you're switching your treatment on a regular basis. I remember we found out that COVID was causing blood clots. I had this one patient, well, it wasn't mine, but this other nurse patient, she was a stable COVID patient. She was pretty stable. She was just on a little bit of oxygen and she was talking. She said, can I get something to drink? The nurse said, okay, like I'll go get you something to drink. And she was like, oh, Monique, can you do this other thing for me so I can go get her something to drink? I said, yeah, sure. Went into the other thing. She went, maybe 5 minutes went by. She went and got her something to drink, came back to give it to her. She died. It was the
No.
freakiest thing. It was like, whoa, what just happened? People were throwing blood clots. COVID was causing blood clots. We didn't know that when COVID first came out. So now we're like, oh, blood clots are happening with COVID. Now we need to give blood thinners.
Sure.
So then that's a new treatment. So then we started giving heparin. It's like, oh, well, maybe it's not heparin. Maybe we need to give Lovenox. Oh, now it's a different blood thinner. Then I went to the ICU and they were like, give TPA. I'm like, what? That's the stroke stroke declotting mechanism. It's just very like all of these different ways. Like, let's try this. Let's try that. I don't want to use the word experimental, but it almost kind of was experimental because, but in a way that like you can't avoid that. You know what I'm saying? Like during the time of COVID, everything was experimental because nobody actually knew what the
Yeah,
cure was
a
or
novel
what the,
disease.
yeah. Unfortunately, people passed away because we didn't know what we were doing. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Like we're literally doing the best we can do with the disease that we know nothing about. So yeah, we're trying this. Oh, now we're gonna try steroids. Now we're gonna try this antibiotic. Maybe if we give this antibiotic, maybe if we try treat like this, maybe if we try that. Maybe that's just like, I mean, we were just like pick something and try it. Pretty much is
Yeah.
kind of what the doctors and people were doing, but using their education, not just doing it haphazardly, but using their education and their judgment to pick something that seemed like this would be a good option. So it was just, and then then they found that it was putting people in kidney failure. So then people were on pretty much bedside dialysis. CRT is what we call it. So it's just like body was just shutting down, and this happened, and then that happened. Oh, now we have to. Oh, and then people who are diabetic. Oh, now their sugars are out the roof because infection causes increased blood sugar. Now they're on. Now you're treating a diabetes drip, and now you're treating a kidney failure, and now you're treating, and that's usually what allows people to pass away from COVID. It's not that the actual disease kills you. It's kind of like people who have AIDS. AIDS never really kills the person. It's just that it lowers their immune system so
Sure.
much that the common cold comes around and kills them.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like a similar thing with COVID where it just shuts all of your things down that you just end up passing away from kidney failure or like something just super shut down. So it's just unfortunate.
So nursing is already a taxing job pre-COVID. Provides and presents another element. And so all that taken together, even what you just shared with us, the perspectives, the varying perspectives of outsiders looking in, whether it's just, pundits, persons who this is their job, we just want to pick holes in the healthcare system, to the different perspectives coming from researchers, and then of course, family members. All of these things combined, not to mention each individual nurse's, your own personal, outside of nursing, your friendships, your family, your own personal dreams and desires and aspirations, or even challenges, it can easily lead to burnout. One of the things I'm studying is pastoral well-being, and I'm focusing on how we can curb the adverse emotional effects of isolation and burnout on pastors. I would imagine that nurses are no exception to the potential of anxiety, depression, burnout, especially if your personality bends towards really taking on the experiences of your patients, this whole secondary stress. So how have you sought to cope with what you're exposed to? How have you employed a level of, this is what I do for self-care. This is what I do to detect and discern. Okay, Monique, you're heavy right now.
Yeah.
Or have you ever even experienced burnout? Share that with us.
Oh yeah, burnout is real. Like you said, pastoral. I think, like you said, anybody that does with people, I think they're
Mm-hmm.
going to have burnout. And I think when I first experienced my first episode of burnout was 3 years ago. I was working
Mm-hmm.
ER and I was in Baltimore. That was the ghettoest ER I'd ever worked at.
Wow.
It was heavy. It was heavy. And I just, with everything, and then you have to realize too, like you said, you have your own things going on in your life as well. So you might be heartbroken from some relationship, and you might be going through this, and or your parent or family member or someone passed away. Like, you have your own things that you're trying to deal with as well. But then when you go to work, you have to get rid of all of that, because
Sure.
this patient that's here having a heart attack does not care that your grandmother just passed away yesterday. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
don't care that you just got a divorce yesterday, or that you just had a stillborn baby 2 months ago, and you're sitting here looking at them being pregnant. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
they don't realize like certain things, and you can't bring it up and say, I'm just having a bad day. Like, like, nobody cares.
Sure.
So I think I had my burnout in 2017. I was just going through a lot, and then the job was going through a lot, and I just wanted to cry. I felt that it was getting in the way of me working that night.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to cry. I was just done. And I went to the bathroom and sat on the toilet and just started crying. I was just
Right.
so like, I was heartbroken. I was in this, I was that. Well, I didn't lock the bathroom door. So somebody walked in the bath. It was like a single stall bathroom. And someone walked in. I was just sitting there on the toilet, and they were like, oh, sorry. And I was just like, I didn't even care. I was
Yeah.
just like, that's when I knew I was just,
That's when you know, okay, when this kind of interaction can
right,
take place, and I'm just like, it's okay.
right. Yeah.
I'm
When I
just
don't even
doing me
care.
right now.
Right.
Yeah.
You're sitting there half naked and someone walks in and you don't even like flinch. Sometimes you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, sorry. It's just, I was just like, okay, whatever. Keep the door open if you want. Like, and the person was just like, oh, and I didn't even get up to lock the door. I didn't even care. And
Yeah.
so I think that that was a really big indicator for me at the time, that just showed like, I am burnt out. I just
Mm.
need, and another thing too, like, I was getting a lot of like kind of like anxieties, like in the ER we get a lot of like car accidents. I guess the thing about working in the ER is you realize that you are very like, you're very, what's that word, you're very mortal. Like, you
Sure.
can die. I feel that I can die. I don't feel like I am anything special towards death, and
Yeah. That.
you see all of these deaths and things happen, and you're like, that could be me, that could be my child, that could be my mom, that could be like, it got to the point where if I saw my mom calling me like at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, I'd be like, oh my gosh, who died? Like, is she okay?
Mm.
Is she, because we were in the ER, I remember one ER I was working in, when the ambulance calls and they'll say like, 50-year-old male, a motorcycle accident. People who had a 50-year-old male husband who drove a motorcycle would start freaking out. They start calling their husband, are you okay? And one day, it was like worst nightmare. One of the nurses, her husband was actually the accident and came in, and it was just like, it can happen. Like, we think we're crazy, but then it's like, it happens, and you're like, see, it happened. And so like, you just see all of these freak accidents all the time, and you just feel like all of these things can happen to me. And sometimes what you find is a lot of ER nurses, or a lot of people, they don't do anything because they feel like, I got to be extra safe because I know all the things out there. And so I
Right.
found that when I was driving, I started getting kind of like panic attacks while driving, because I drive a lot and I love driving. But then you see all these crazy accidents on the road where it's like, people do like head on collisions, or just someone just gets on the ramp the wrong way and they're just crashing. That happens so often, more often than people know.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't make the news. You know what I'm saying? It's just, um, people are diabetic driving. Their sugar drops and they just crash. People have strokes while driving. They're driving and have a stroke, just crash. People have seizures while driving. So many people are driving. They should not be on the road. I'm not trying to make anybody anxious about driving right now,
Right.
but there's so like 60% of the people on the road should not be on the road. Like, it's crazy. So when I started driving, I was just like, like, is this person next to me on drugs? Like,
Mm.
maybe, is this car coming over to my lane? Are they just gonna like kill me? And like, is this person next to me maybe like having a stroke? Like, to a normal person, people who don't work in the ER, they just think drunk driving, and they might just think someone's falling asleep.
Sure.
That's it. I'm thinking all kind of stuff, like, maybe they're gonna have a seizure, like, just like, and then I just start panic, like, I just would start getting like not panic. I maybe panic attack might be the wrong word to use, but I just start feeling like I can't really like breathe, and then I had to like pull over and just like calm myself down and just like I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to get out of the ER. Like you just start and studies show that like ER nurses are the highest risk for undiagnosed PTSD and anxiety and like
Sure.
stomach problems because of the amount of just stress anxiety that they get. So I took a break from the ER and I started doing the beautiful part about nursing is that there's so many different types of nursing. As you know, like with your sister, like she can be doing like labor and delivery right now, and then 2 years from now she can decide, you know what, I want to get into like ICU, and she can do it. It's beautiful because you don't have to like go back to school or anything. You can just switch
Sure.
and they'll just kind of train you. And I love that about nursing because a lot of other careers, if they decide they want to be something else, they have to like go back to school. If you're a doctor and you're a surgeon, you decide you want to be a cardiologist, you can't just switch. You have to go
Right.
back and get like training. So I really like that. So I decided to take some time to just switch over to something less like that. And that's when I started doing like PACU pre-op surgery type of
Hmm.
thing, way more relaxed, just like hanging out. And I think that's the beautiful part about nursing is because when you feel like you're doing that burnout, you can just switch to something less. And
Sure.
so that's what I did. And that's why when I came to Florida last year, I was also having some burnout just from traveling. Like I was getting double burnout because you get ER burnout and then you get travel burnout where you just want to just be in one place for a little while. Because I literally
Sure.
have been switching where I lived every 3 months for the last like 5 years.
Right.
So so yeah, so you get some of that burnout, and so you just kind of like adjust to it. And so that's why that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to go to COVID land in New York, because I was trying to do this self-care thing. And ever since COVID, when COVID came, we thought that it was just going to be temporary. We thought it was like, all right,
Right.
April, May, by August we'll be back good. And I think a lot of us nurses now we're realizing like it's still here. You know,
Hmm.
you guys like in Texas right now, they have nurses out there working every single day still. And
Wow.
I was out there for a little while. I just came back home. I've been doing a lot of different after New York. I've still done a lot of different COVID assignments. I've done COVID assignments in Florida. I've done COVID assignments in Texas, California. So I've still done other assignments, and they still make you work every day.
Sure.
And I think the nurses, we just think it's something temporary. We've just been like, yeah, I can do this. I'll just do this for the month of June. By July, August, we'll be back to normal. And I think now it's really dawning on us like, yeah, we've been working at like a speed of 100 since April,
Hmm.
and it's not. And so I think we're getting to the point now where a lot of us are realizing we need to do self-care because this might be around for a little while.
Right.
So like right now, I'm not even working. So I kind of doing this binge working and then binge relaxation where I go and I like work, and I'll work for a month, 2 months straight doing something, and then I go home and like relax for like 3 weeks and do like
Sure.
absolutely nothing. And then I go back and work again for, this is not what I'll do in my future. But right now with COVID, I have found that to be the best way to do it for me.
Sure. So speaking of future, if you could send yourself a text message 10 years into the future, what would that text message say?
I can't believe you're still alive.
Okay. I hope I hope you are still alive and then some 10 years from now.
I feel like I would just be like, wow, you're still alive. Like you made it to 40. Um, that is definitely is a really interesting question because most times when people ask this question, it's the opposite. They
Hmm.
usually say if you can tell your past self something, you could send a message to yourself 10 years ago. What advice would you give yourself?
Hmm.
But it's almost like, what would I tell my future self? It's very like, wow, that's a really good question. Like I would just, I feel like I feel like my future self should be telling me something.
Okay.
like,
So help me
like,
out.
like, let me know how it is up there. Like, I don't have anything to tell you. Um, because I mean, I honestly, I just feel like because I don't know. Like I said, I think it goes. I feel so mortal that
Sure.
sometimes I feel like I'm not going to live that long.
Hmm.
Like it's really eerie. Like I probably need some counseling in that regard, where I just feel like I'm going to. I hope I don't die, but I feel like I could. You know, like
Yeah, and I think again, you've helped us to situate that thought and that feeling in the context of what you do, being exposed way more than most people are, by the way.
right.
I'm often reminded when I would make hospital visits, and in the context of COVID, I've only made one being permitted to come into the actual hospital. This particular member was allowed one visit per day. And so, in correspondence with their family, she had requested, Pastor, I would love to see you. Unfortunately, she passed away, not from COVID, but she passed away. She might have had a sense of her own mortality, and she kind of wanted, this visit, which did ultimately, it was my last visit with her. But whenever I'm going to the hospital, and this was no exception, I'm often reminded, like, yo, there are just people in here, and each person represents a family. Every scenario will not end the way maybe we want it to. And I'm reminded of my own mortality, but that's intermittent visiting. You
Right.
do this all the time. So, the feelings of, life is mortal, like you said, especially being young like we are, this can be you. There is no guarantee of longevity. We plan, we have aspirations, we want, everything, I guess, that makes for what we might call a full life. And I think what this has reminded us this season is life does not have to be long in order to be full. Life can be full.
Yeah.
And the definition of success does not always have to be long term. Kobe Bryant, Chadwick Boseman, those things hit us
Yeah.
to a great degree because, yes, we've known them forever, but they were so young.
Yeah.
And it reminded us yet again, hey, youthfulness does not mean immunity from, these things. And for anyone listening who might resonate with what Monique has shared, not just as a nurse, but even kind of like, yo, this year, COVID wise, has reminded us all, no matter what age you are, of your own mortality. Don't feel bad. You're not abnormal. I think it is kind of normal as a human being to not be morbid and live life paranoid. And there's nothing wrong if, like you said, I need to go and sit with someone. I was speaking with a colleague very recently about that and how for the past year I've been making regular visits to sit with someone as a part of developing a lifestyle preventative, because I don't want to assume that just because I think, oh, I'm doing okay. No, this has been a lot. This year has been a lot. No matter who you are, if you're retired, if you're a 9-year-old, if you're a high school graduate, the first high school graduating class to ever have drive-by graduations, you're a freshman in college and you're not on campus, you're doing stuff online. It's been a lot. And so there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I don't need to manage this all on my own. So I appreciate you being transparent with us to say, I help other people, I serve other people, I do my best. I've been in literally on the front lines, placing my life in daily exposure to this. But then even that, outside of that, I should say, I'm reminded of the brevity and the delicacy of life. And, we just have options and opportunity to say, how's that going to impact me? Am I going to succumb and say, you know what, I'm just going to try to make it, or I'm
Right.
going to seek to live a full life? And I
Right.
do hope, in all honesty, like, don't just make it to 40. I want
I
us
know.
to be like, we've
Wow,
known each other
you
for
made
50
it.
years. Like, girl, look at you.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's great,
Yeah.
and like you said like for you guys, it's like a reminder. That's like one of the
Hmm.
things that the picture I try to paint to people is like, for me, COVID was never a reminder of life.
Mm,
I got the reminder all the time for
sure.
the last 8 years. Working. It's just really interesting because now people are like, oh, frontliners, and it's like the term never really hit me because I feel like I've been a frontliner all the time.
All the
It's
time.
just
Sure.
now that people are really realizing the frontliners because of COVID. But it's like, listen, these frontliners, we have been doing this all of this time without
Mm.
any recognition. Dealing, you know how many times I've been in the ER and somebody will message me and say like, I'll get an email and say, oh, Monique, your patient that you brought in yesterday, they ended up having tuberculosis. Please go get checked. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know
Wow.
they had tuberculosis. I was walking around in their room hanging out. And so it's just like you're constantly a frontline worker. You constantly see that life is so that you can just lose your life all the time. So like how you said, like with Kobe Bryant or like Chadwick, like I feel like to the normal population, those are reminders. So it's not always in their face.
Hmm.
But I feel like to us, they're not really reminders. They're just like, yeah,
This
yeah,
happens.
we're seeing this all the time. It may not have been Kobe, it may not have been someone such in the spotlight, but just last week, you had someone come in from a crazy boat crash or something.
Wow.
So it's
Sure.
just like it's really like you said, it leads to burnout because constantly in your face. So
Sure.
Praise be the Lord, I live to be 40. Praise be, it makes me more grateful for life. I have like zero complaints, and that was another reason why my mom didn't want me to go out to do the COVID, because I had my own health problems randomly come up amongst me, and my mom was like, "You need to take care of this." I ended up having to have surgery in the middle of it all, and
Right.
like it just ended up being one hot riggedy mess. But I was still going right back out. My mom's like, "You're nuts! Like, what is wrong with you?" And so that made a lot of other people, and it made me, even as a patient, be able to experience um what other patients are going through during COVID. My very first surgery, I had never had surgery before. It came up out of nowhere and ended up being like, I was like in tears, but I was by myself. The nurses didn't want to
Mm.
come in my room. Nobody wanted to be around me because they were just like, uh, yeah, we have to limit our exposure. So it was a lonely experience. So I think me too, having that lonely experience, it really helps me to give care to other people and try to like make them feel like they have someone there with them.
Sure. Listen, Mo, I thank you so much, not only for this conversation, but for the work that you're doing, for being willing enough to take us in the past to get a sense of what your journey's been like up until now. And if you wouldn't mind, I just want to pray for you, for your health and for your work and for your future.
Yeah, of course.
Let's do it. Father, we thank you so much for Monique Johnson. Thank you for how you've prepared her for such a time as this, not just in the classroom, but in the school of life. She has been able to travel as a nurse, and she's been able to be a nurse who travels and enjoys traveling, being exposed to different cultures and settings, both nationally and internationally. And she's been kind enough to be very transparent, very honest about the highs and lows of being a nurse, the highs and lows of this COVID season. And we thank you for her protection. Continue to allow her to have a full life as she serves and as she lives and interacts with family and friends. And I pray that you would give her long life beyond 40, and a life that is focused on bringing you glory and helping others. Thank you for our friendship and for this time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Now, Pastor Martin prayed on me. I'm going to live to be 70.
Hey, hopefully we'll live to be there. Or as I like to say, if we're not living that long, let's be in the kingdom first. I'm okay with
Yeah,
that.
right.
That would be much better for me. Listen, everybody, we've had a phenomenal conversation. I hope that you have been able to gain and glean pearls of wisdom and knowledge and insight to the unique experience of persons who have always been on the front line, who have always been giving and giving and giving and pouring into others. If you have a nurse, if you have a physician, if you have a postman or woman, anybody who's out there doing what they do for the good of humanity, make sure you show them the proper regard, appreciation, and respect, not just because of the season that we're in, because of that, but not only because of that, just in general. Let them know that they are loved, they are valued, they are appreciated. If you can't think of a way to express that appreciation, ask them, what do you need? What can I do? We want to support one another's whole health and well being, that we can continue to live and thrive. That's all we have for this episode of The Living Room. I'm your host, Richard Martin. Our special guest today has been Miss Monique Johnson. Continue to listen, continue to learn, and continue to live. We'll see you next time.